my job is to introduce the notion of interoperability in quite a macro way before going into greater detail later. When we talk about interoperability, we have different levels. Let's start by differentiating between two notions. The first notion is standardization. This is the process of ensuring that objects of the same type all have the same basic characteristics and coding. So I'm going to talk in greater detail about this, but it's about the same process of coding so that we're talking about the same disease. That's what I mean by standardization. And then interoperability, which is the problem of programs or infrastructure being able to communicate between each other. So this is obviously at the heart of the entire ecosystem. This question of interoperability, in any case, is at the heart of healthcare. You can see doctors, laboratories, hospitals, infrastructure, and many more pictograms on the screen. If we want to move forward in research and in application, in innovation and in healthcare, we need to make all of these different operators interoperable. This does not just impact healthcare, all sectors where data plays an important role, you have interoperability problems. And we know that there are many nowadays. So let's go into greater detail now. I have identified 4 different levels of interoperability. So there is a problem of legal interoperability. So this is about governance. We need homogeneous, uniform governance with the same standards. There's semantic interoperability. That is what I was talking about with the example of coding disease. It's to make sure that the same meaning is associated with the same code. There's syntactic interoperability. This is about grammar itself, because the way that the data is organized, the format of the tables, are they structured in the same way? Are we going to be able to run the same program from one database and another database? The structure needs to be the same. And then there's technical interoperability, and then we go into much of a more technical infrastructure-based interoperability with information systems in a specific country, for instance. And we need all of the different objects to be able to communicate between themselves. I'm going to try and make it a little bit more concrete now to show you to what extent these are important issues. I'm going to talk about 4 use cases. I'm going to start with the first. Many of you will have heard about this. This is the Lancet Study. This is a very prestigious journal. It's very prestigious to be published in this journal, in the Lancet. In 2020, there was an article appeared which led to the suspension of the use of hydroxychloroquine in the fight against COVID-19. It had used data from 40 different countries, and on the basis of real data, they were able to conclude using algorithms on this data that hydroxychloroquine has no impact. This had a very main impact because WHO responded to that, the French government responded to that as well, and it was no longer able to be used. And it was a scandal, because it's easy to say this in hindsight, but I think that many people realized that the article was false, not in its conclusion. Many studies have proven that the conclusion was correct, but the study itself was completely false. It is impossible nowadays to make 40 countries with different institutions interoperable. If it were possible, it would take years and years of work. The coding problems, this was the first wave, and people were dealing with this completely differently. And I'm not even talking about legal interoperability here. And they really did not do things properly. So the issues here are huge because look what we could do if it was interoperable, but unfortunately we are not there yet. We need to make progress. This is the use case that most of you will have heard of, the most significant. On the right-hand side, there is another use. This is for rare diseases. This is essential. We need more data. And this means that we are going to have to be working on an international scale, which means that we need interoperable data. And on the left, this is a project that we're sorting at the Health Data Hub across a number of pilot emergency rooms in France. So we look at the call reports for COVID in this instance in order to extract information and do automatic data coding. And we started with COVID, but we could address other diseases in the future. I would now like to talk about what we do at the Health Data Hub for interoperability. This is just a short slide to give you a very brief presentation. I think there's 2 slides, sorry. We start with observations. We have a great database selection in France. They're very used and they were very useful for COVID. We have the ministry database, bases, CNDS, which we use particularly at the Health Data Hub. These are used, but many of us believe that they are underexploited. They are used, there are great research projects, but they're underutilized. And this is for 3 main reasons. Firstly, interoperability. I'm going to put that at the top. This is what we're discussing today. The fact that it's dispersed everywhere, it's very difficult if you're not in an ecosystem to know which database is where. And then also governance. This is legal interoperability. Governance is very heterogeneous. The main mission of this is to solve the problem, is to add a building block in order to solve this within the ecosystem. We want to facilitate access to health data with single, transparent governance and secure access to health data. In practice, the Health Data Hub was created around 2.5 years ago. It is a structure of public interest. There are 56 different actors that are split across 9 different sectors. You can see the state, institutions, healthcare structures, research, citizens. You can see all of the different colleges represented. The mission that we have to facilitate access to health data for research of public interest can be divided into 4 submissions. We want to become a unique gateway to access health data in France. We want to identify and standardize and make interoperable a collection of databases that have been identified as high impact in order to facilitate access to health data for public interest projects. This includes the SNDS, but then also other databases. We want to implement what we have today, a scalable platform and high security platform in order to enable high computing capacities for those that need it. And finally, it's about the interoperability of the ecosystem itself. We want to smooth different exchanges between the key stakeholders at both a national and international level. With regard to interoperability and standardization, we are working at a national level, but also at a European level on a number of projects in a number of different fields. So here I would like to give you 3 examples that are going to be addressed in greater detail later on. Firstly, I'd like to talk about the TEHDAS joint action, which started last February. This is a European joint action in order to develop recommendations for the future European health data space. There, I think, are 6 people involved in this, and we are actively participating in the work package. Then there is the EHDS European Health Data Space pilot project that will start next September. The consortium will be selected or announced in any case at the end of the month. So this is a pilot project in order to concretely test the EHDS. And then another project that we will hear a lot about this evening is the work that we've carried out and are continuing to carry out. We should be finishing this year. This is the format database formatting project, the claim database, sorry. So we're formatting the claim database. This is work that we have started that should be finished by the end of this year, and this is really fundamental work. Looking at interoperability here, there are more than just 3 projects. There is legal interoperability, but we're going to be looking especially at semantic and syntactic interoperability today. These are the issues that are of great importance. We need to have it in the right format, whether it's FHIR, and then also challenges to have common standards, vocabularies, and technologies. And there's also a policy of sharing everything that the ecosystem can create. So program libraries and tools, for instance. I would like to thank you very much for listening. I'm going to hand back over to Oceane.